I've struggled with delayed gratification for my entire life, but not in the way that most people do. Most people find it difficult to delay gratification, often opting for the quick dopamine hit in what feels good now over what is probably best for them in the long run. But I myself have always been the complete opposite. A lot of this, honestly, is probably an anxiety response, rooted in feelings of insecurity or financial instability. A lot of it is probably also my tendency to prioritize logic over emotion, which is generally seen as a positive thing, but like anything else can be taken too far. For as long as I can remember, I've always had this arbitrary goal point in mind, this place that I imagined that I would get to where I would feel happiness, or at least contentment, a feeling that I actually described as permanence. The problem is that goal point is always moving. A lot of people see that as a positive thing. They see it as a sign of ambition, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels like a life half lived. It feels like reaching for something that you may never actually be able to grab hold of. It feels like an inability to settle. And it feels like you're kind of dancing on the precipice of something that you can't even really articulate. I remember being 19 years old and living at my mother's house and thinking about the fact that in a few short years I would be moving out and getting my own apartment. And that idea excited me more than I could even describe. But it also filled me with this feeling of hesitation, knowing that I shouldn't get too comfortable where I currently am because it's going to change very soon. In truth, at that point in my life, I couldn't even afford to move out on my own. But I remember calculating how much money it would take for me to be able to do that, and just thinking about how happy I would be when I finally made that much money and was able to get my own apartment. And then, like many people, I watched a lot of my friends move into apartments, only to stay there for a year or two and then be rent-evicted or have their rent increase so much they were forced out or otherwise be evicted for reasons that they couldn't control. And the idea of a stranger, of a landlord, having that kind of control over my life and over, by proxy, my sense of security and comfort was terrifying to me. That feeling of excitement I had about potentially getting my own apartment became just a feeling of dread, knowing that I won't be able to settle there either. So I moved the goalpost. Now I wasn't going to rent an apartment, I was going to buy a house. But again, that was so far out of reach for me financially, there was no way I could afford that. So I decided, okay, well, I just have to work harder, I have to make more money, I have to try harder, I have to struggle longer. And once I get to that point and I'm able to buy my own place, it'll be mine and nobody can take it from me and I'm going to be so happy.
If I could say shitballs to the principal, I'd be so happy.
7 years later, at the age of 26, to my shock and surprise, I was able to pull it off. I bought a little townhouse on the outskirts of Toronto. It was small, but it was cute. And I remember moving into it and feeling very overwhelmed. It was a big change for me. I was living on my own for the first time. I was in a city I'd never lived in before. I didn't know anybody there. And it was just a big adjustment. I remember not even being fully unpacked yet and telling my new next door neighbor that I couldn't wait till I could sell the place in a year or two and get out of there and move back to an area I was more familiar in. And so with that idea in mind, I became hesitant to fully unpack. Not physically, like I eventually put away all my stuff and got rid of the boxes, but mentally. I never really allowed myself to settle in that house because I had convinced myself I wasn't going to be there long. So I resisted the urge to buy too many things, both for the purpose of saving money for the next move, but also because I didn't want to fill my house with a bunch of stuff that I didn't have to move with and not even know if it would suit the next place I was going to end up. So I didn't buy very much furniture. I kept the house pretty empty. I didn't buy any home decor. I didn't buy a rug. I didn't hang any art on the walls. I tried to keep the house empty and as close to mint condition as possible. As time passed, I became more comfortable and no longer felt an urgency to leave the area, but I did decide that I wanted to move up from my townhouse to a detached house. I wanted a house that was really truly all mine. I wanted more freedom, I wanted more outside space, but the problem was that in order to pull that off, I would have to increase my income. I'd have to save up a whole bunch more money all over again. It wasn't going to be easy, but I fantasized over the idea of finding my forever home. A home where I would finally want to stay in the long run. Somewhere where I could upgrade it and personalize it and renovate it and customize it and do whatever I wanted to it, but never have to leave. More specifically than the house itself, what I was fantasizing over was again that feeling of being able to settle and that feeling of permanence I'd been searching for forever, hoping that once I finally got to this place, I would be content to stay here and I could finally just relax. I fantasized about that feeling, about that sense of relief that I would feel from knowing that I no longer need to save up oodles of money for another move, that I can finally relax a little bit, that I can treat myself to some things that I've often deprived myself of, things like being able to go out to eat a little bit more and not feel guilty about it, maybe hire somebody to shovel the snow for me in the winter, hire somebody to detail my car, oh my god, would that be a luxury. I dreamed about no longer having this far-fetched goalpost in mind that I had to endlessly delay gratification to get to. I dreamed about being able to spend money on wants instead of just needs and to not feel bad about it. I dreamed about being able to take any extra money I had and invest it back into my home and upgrade it and constantly work on it and make it closer and closer to what I always dreamed it would be. And most importantly, I dreamed about being able to finally take my foot off the gas a little bit after white-knuckling my way through my entire life so far. And if you're thinking, damn dude, that sounds exhausting and unhealthy, you're right, it's both. Financial anxiety is a real thing, and it's something that I've struggled with my entire life, and yes, I do need therapy. Everybody needs therapy. I'm a big believer in the fact that everybody needs somebody to talk to, because in some way, shape, or form, we're all going through it, we're all dealing with different things, and that's why I'm very happy that today's video is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is on a mission to make therapy more affordable and more accessible for everybody. Whether you're dealing with depression, anxiety, or any other mental health struggles, BetterHelp has professional therapists available who are very experienced in dealing with all sorts of issues and can help you overcome the things that are holding you back from living your best life. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy network, and because it's fully online, you're not limited to just a therapist in your area. All you have to do is answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you with the perfect licensed therapist for your needs. You can communicate with them whoever is most comfortable for you, whether that's over video call, phone, text, or chat. And if for any reason your therapist isn't a good match, you can switch at any time for no extra cost, and because it's all online, there's no awkwardness to it at all. BetterHelp is every bit as effective as traditional therapy, but it's more affordable, more convenient, and in my opinion, more comfortable. I can only speak for myself, but I personally much prefer doing therapy from the comfort of my own home at a time that works for me than having to drive to an office and sit in a waiting room and just sit there feeling out of my element. To get started and get 10% off your first month, head over to betterhelp.com/accordingtonicole or click the link in the description box down below. Clicking this link not only saves you 10%, but also helps to support this channel. Thank you very much to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. And well, if you've been subscribed to this channel for a while, you know exactly how this whole situation played out, but if you're new here, here is the TLDR. I impulsively bought this house that I'm sitting in right now at the peak of the real estate market in the spring of 2022, prior to listing my townhouse for sale. 3 days later, Ukraine invaded Russia, interest rates started to rise, and I listed my townhouse for sale without much success. After 6 weeks of serial panic attacks, crying myself to sleep every night, getting minimal showings, getting lowball offers, firing my real estate agent, hiring a new one, staging the house, starting over, selling for too low, struggling to qualify for a mortgage, moving out and then back in and then back out again, the deal ultimately closed, only for me to realize that I was way too flippant when I bought this house, and I don't even like it. Then I moved in here only to find the place absolutely filthy and in complete disrepair. Within the first month of being here, I had issues with the carpets, the plumbing, the electrical, and the air conditioner. Oh, and Levi got fleas for the first time in his life. I'm pretty sure there were actually fleas in the carpets because it was so gross in here. So 5 months later, I renovated the entire place with money I didn't even really have, because I figured if I was gonna stay here, it had to happen, and if I was gonna move, it still had to happen, because nobody was gonna buy the house in the condition that I was stupid enough to buy it in.
What? What are you thinking?
And that brings us to today. I'm 100 times more comfortable in this house today than I was when I moved in a year ago, for sure. All the issues have been resolved. The house is mostly all newly renovated. It's fresh, it's clean. Everything's okay, everything's quiet, in a good way. But I still carry this feeling of impermanence with me, because honestly, deep down, I'd still like to move one more time. And of course, I want to do it right this time. I want to do everything opposite of how I did it last time. I want to sell this house first, see how the money all plays out, take my time finding the right place, finding the perfect home, negotiate a fair price on it, take my time fixing it up, move in when I'm ready, and finally, hopefully find that feeling of contentment and permanence. Buying this house was such a terrible experience in every possible way, and yes, I'm well aware that it was all my fault, but I feel like I'm never really going to be able to shake that feeling of not being happy here. But as always, it's not that simple. For one thing, this house is currently worth about 15% less than I paid for it when I bought it last year, and that's not even taking into account what I spent on renovations. And then there's all of these costs associated with moving. By the time that I paid for my realtor, my land transfer taxes, my lawyers, my appraisers, my inspectors, my movers, all of that stuff together, I'd be down about $100,000. Yeah, you heard me right, $100,000. So my buying power would be significantly reduced in the next place, and that's not even taking into account any renovations or fix-ups I want to do when I got there. So it's really just not financially feasible for me. And of course, that's not even touching on the physical and emotional stress that come along with moving, which I've handled very poorly both times, and the last time in particular was the worst experience of my life, and I really don't want to ever have to go through that again. But still, this feeling of wanting to move again has prevented me from fully mentally unpacking. It's prevented me from spending money on things. It's prevented me from fully furnishing the house. It's prevented me from putting art on the walls. On a good day, I can look around here and feel genuine gratitude for what I have. A pretty house in a safe neighborhood that nobody can take from me, a good job, my health. At the end of the day, I can recognize that it's just a house and it's not that big of a deal. And I can see the things that I don't like as opportunities for me to fix them bit by bit as I can afford to. And I make peace with the idea of staying here long term. And on those days, the feeling of comfort and permanence feels a little bit closer. On a bad day, I wake up depressed and mentally rehash the entire situation for the millionth time, which does nothing but further deteriorate my mental health. I look around and I see all the features of the house that I overlooked when I first bought it and that I've decided that I hate. I see the endless pit of money and stress that would be required to change those things, and I see the things that I can't change no matter what I do. I pull out my calculator and I add up the fact that all of the changes I would want to make would cost me nearly $100,000, which I don't even have. But why spend $100,000 here when I can just spend that money moving? Why add more money to a dumpster fire, right? And that feeling of comfort once again hides behind a series of financial and emotional hurdles that could take me years to overcome, and I feel sad and exhausted. And yes, before anybody feels the need to point it out, much of the problem here is not the house, it's me. I'm well aware. It's my expectations being so misaligned from my capabilities, from my income level, from my stage in life, and even just from my age. It's me convincing myself that my sense of happiness is directly tied to the place that I live or the things that I own, even though I know deep down that that's not true. It's me being ambitious to a fault, leading me to consistently making my life more complicated than it needs to be, and I'm working on it. But there's one more layer to this onion. There's this thing that I keep doing. A couple months before I bought this house, another house sold in my neighborhood with the exact same floor plan. The house had already been renovated, and it sold so fast I didn't get a chance to see it, and it sold so high that there's no way I could have afforded it. But when I looked at the pictures, I fell in love with it. And that was the initial motivation for me buying this house. I remember seeing this listing and thinking, hey, you know what? That's the same house, it just hasn't been fixed up yet. I can have the renovations done myself, it would cost me less money, and I can make it look just like that house. And I did it. This house now looks very similar to that house that I had seen that I had fallen in love with. So whenever I'm having one of those bad days, I pull up the old listing to the other house and I look at it and I still love it. Like if I could turn back time, if it was within my range of affordability, I would still go back today and I would buy that house. So why is it that when I look around here, I just don't get that same feeling even though they look very, very similar? The only thing I can really say about that house compared to mine is that in the photos, it looks really nicely staged. There's a lot of furniture, there's a rug in the living room, there's some art on the walls. My house looks like a house, but that one looks like a home. And my God, how much easier would it be if I could make myself happy by just buying a rug and some decor rather than moving again? But what if it doesn't help? What if I buy all those things and I still feel the same way and I still don't want to live here anymore, I still want to move? Then I guess I have some nice new stuff to bring with me to my next house, right? Or if worse comes to worse, I guess I have some nice stuff to post on Facebook Marketplace. What am I supposed to say? The point is that the ability to delay gratification is a good skill to have. Thinking about the long-term effects of your decisions before you make them is a good way to ensure you make good decisions, says the person who impulsively bought a house that she hates. Don't even. But what I'm starting to realize is you can really only delay your comfort and your happiness for so long, and then what? Am I gonna be 80 years old and be worrying about what my life is gonna look like at 90? It's ridiculous, right? I find that I have to constantly remind myself that for now is not forever, in a lot of ways, but especially with this house, I mean, I could live here another year, I could live here 5 more years or 10 more years, but I don't have to stay here forever if I don't want to, and why should I live in discomfort in the meantime? And maybe, just maybe, if I stop forcing myself to live in discomfort and impermanence, things might actually start to feel comfortable and permanent. Who'da thunk it? If anything that I talked about in this video was at all relatable to you in any way, drop me a comment down below and let me know that I'm not the only one. Please also like the video if you found it valuable or interesting at all. Subscribe if you haven't done so yet. You can follow me on Instagram, you can check me out on Patreon. All the links to everything will be in the description box down below. Other than that, thank you guys so much as always for watching. Take care and I'll see you next week.